Hi, how's everybody doing? Hope you're all safe and well. One of the things I've discovered about being a vicar is that sometimes when you're out and about without your collar on, people don't recognise you. And I waved to somebody the other day and they didn't respond, and obviously they didn't quite work out who I was. People have said to me, "Oh, we didn't recognise you without your clothes on, vicar." Less said about that the better, I think. Some of the post-resurrection stories are really brilliant because they bring a kind of human element into the stories which some of the other gospel stories don't bring at all. And we're going to have a look at one of those today, and it's one where Jesus meets two blokes on the road to Emmaus, and they don't recognise him at first, and there's some real wonderful human elements about the whole story. So let's have a listen to it.
Emmaus. On that same day, two of Jesus' followers were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking to each other about all the things that had happened. As they talked and discussed, Jesus himself drew near and walked along with them. They saw him, but somehow did not recognize him. Jesus said to them, "What are you talking about to each other as you walk along?" They stood still with sad faces. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have been happening there these last few days?" "What things?" he asked. "The things that happened to Jesus of Nazareth," they answered. "This man was a prophet and was considered by God and by all the people to be powerful in everything he said and did. Our chief priests and rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and he was crucified. And we had hoped that he would be the one who was going to set Israel free. Besides all that, this is now the 3rd day since it happened. Some of the women of our group surprised us. They went at dawn to the tomb, but could not find his body. They came back saying they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he is alive. Some of our group went to the tomb and had found it exactly as the woman had said, but they did not see him." Then Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, how slow you are to believe everything the prophets said. Was it not necessary for the Messiah to suffer these things and then to enter his glory?" And Jesus explained to them what was said about himself in all the scriptures, beginning with the books of Moses and the writings of all the prophets. As they came near the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further, but they held him back, saying, "Stay with us. The day is almost over and it is getting dark." So he went in to stay with them. He sat down to eat with them, took the bread and said the blessing. Then he broke the bread and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. They said to each other, "Wasn't it like a fire burning in us when he talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" They got up at once and went back to Jerusalem, where they found the 11 disciples gathered together with the others, and saying, "The Lord is risen indeed, he has appeared to Simon." The two then explained to them what had happened on the road and how they had recognized the Lord when he broke the bread.
Perhaps you'll recognise me now with my vicar collar on. Tragedy has struck in today's gospel. These two disciples are walking towards Emmaus, away from Jerusalem, and struggling with the loss of someone that they loved. They're talking and discussing, going over those dreadful events of previous days. All of their hopes had been fixed on Jesus, but his arrest was quickly followed by his brutal crucifixion. Now There are strange stories that the women had found his tomb empty. Has someone even stolen his body? Could it get any worse? Heartbroken, they struggle to make sense of it, partly because they are both suffering a sense of bereavement. But as they walk, they discover they are not alone. A stranger begins to walk alongside them. With careful questions, he encourages them to share their heartbreak with him. And when they do, eventually they recognise him, and he gives them hope in their hearts. Quite often, we focus on the latter part of today's gospel story, when Jesus is recognised in the breaking of the bread. But this earlier part is also important. Those two disciples might have simply walked on when Jesus asked what troubled them. They might have said, "Oh, nothing, doesn't matter." Or they might have even said, "Mind your own business." If that was the case, they might have never heard him opening up the scriptures to them, let alone recognising Jesus later on in that breaking of the bread. Simply by sharing their grief and concerns with this stranger, they opened up a conversation that helped to heal them. At this time, it has never been as important for us to share with each other how we feel, especially when our anxiety is heightened. The Emmaus story illustrates how talking and listening can open up new possibilities. Jesus simply began by listening to Cleopas and his friend. If we are grieving, anxious or depressed, let's not be afraid to share our troubles. Talking to each other, telling family and friends how we feel, is a very simple and effective way of maintaining our own mental well-being at this time. And perhaps you might find also Jesus, the stranger, is walking alongside you too. Keep well, stay safe, and although we can't meet at this time, do please give me a call if you want to have a chat. And may the Lord, who is on that Emmaus road, walk with you in that journey. Amen.